Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The New Dad Rock.
Steve, have I got a special treat for you. Do you remember when we were roommates in college at 32 North Street?
How could I forget? It had a huge influence on my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the most played songs that year was Sober by a band called Tool. Do you remember it?
Yeah, Keith, I totally remember that.
Well, check this out. I have a special treat for you and our fans from all over the world. I have our number one San Francisco Richmond's district leading expert and number one fan of Tool with us today, Eric!
Hey, Eric. Welcome to The New Dad Rock.
Thank you, guys. Super excited to be here. Let's get this going. I'm pumped.
Who is Eric?
So Eric's some dude that has known Keith for way too long. We met through a kid in common. His youngest and my oldest were in the same class, so we met by default, became friends by default, and have maintained friendship by stupidity. So it's been a couple years primarily focused on music and beer and random adventures.
Yeah, faulty friendship sums it up. I'm here to quiz you. I'm the Grand Inquisitor. Is Tool your favorite band?
Tool is my favorite band. More importantly, it's my favorite live show. And when I drink, when I see my friends, when I'm in the mood for like energy or adventure or like uplifting, Tool is my go-to band for sure.
When did you first get into Tool?
So I was introduced to Tool back in like 93. I was like 14 years old, so I'm a little younger than you old men.
Wait, what?
I wasn't cool enough for Tool back in 93. Some of you guys might remember their videos that came out around then. They were like claymation and kind of creepy and super loud, which is great, but I was mostly into like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Aerosmith, kind of the softer stuff. I wasn't quite rock. Yeah, exactly.
No. So let me interrupt. 1993, you're 14 years old. Did you know who the Afghan Wigs were?
I did not know about them in 93. I learned about them probably around 2000-ish, like in college, but not back then.
Okay, that's interesting. That's the borderline right there between
in college,
your 20s and your teens. That's what filtered down.
Yeah, no, you guys are definitely older than I am.
How much do you know about Tool?
So there's levels of Tool fandom. So there are people that know every song, every lyric, every show, everything, kind of like the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, you don't have to know that.
Yeah, I don't. Okay. I know enough to like speak to it. But I know some shit, man. Hit me. What you got?
So you said they're your favorite live band.
Yes.
Are they one of those bands that will play the same set list for the whole tour, or do they play the same thing every single night?
They're somewhere in the middle. So I would say I usually go to 1 to 3 shows per tour. Of those shows, probably a third to a half of the songs are repeated, kind of their quote unquote big hits, with the remaining songs being show specific.
So what are those big songs? Like, do they play Sober? They
do. They play Sober. So it depends on which tour they're on, right? So on the Fear Inoculum tour, which is their latest album, they'll play 2 or 3 songs, maybe 4 from the album, like Tempest. They'll play Pneuma. They'll play Invincible and Fear Inoculum. And then they pretty much always play 46 and 2, one of their best songs. They almost always play Lateralis. And Stinkfist is a pretty common song between all the shows.
I know enough about Tool to recognize that those would be the songs. Do they do anything else from...
Yeah, Stinkfist was the opening song.
Well, do they do anything else from Undertow? Do they do Prison Sex, for example? Because that was one of those stop motion...
I don't know that I've heard Prison Sex. So I've been to probably 10 to 15 Tool shows, and I don't think I've heard Prison Sex.
This is the New Dad Rock, dude. You can't say that.
Yeah, but it's a Tool episode, so you have to say things like Prison Sex and Fisting, or it's not going to be a Tool show.
I don't mean to diss on Tool, but I've listened to them again when the hype was building for their new album. So maybe we should step back. And so their most recent album, which is called
Fear Inoculum,
came out in 2020 or was it 2019?
2019.
Okay, but I remember when it came out, it was a huge buildup. Their last album was like 10,000 Days or something like that.
It was in 2006. It had been 13 years between albums.
Yeah, so there was a lot of hype when that came out. So I went back and I listened to, because I remember liking Undertow enough at the time. And then by the time their next albums came out, I was kind of not listening to that music anymore. So I got away from it. You know, for the last 13 years, I was busy being a dad, having kids, and not listening to Tool. Obviously, the cult was developing over that time.
Our lives drifted. We left college. We didn't get into Anima. their second album in '96. Why are the fans so crazy?
So awesome question. First of all, it's pronounced Anima. So that there's proof enough that you're not actually a Tool fan. So like strike one on the research there, Mr. Keith. But I would argue that from Undertow to Anima, their sound changed somewhat. However, between Anima and Lateralis, which was 96 to 01, not coincidentally, or I guess coincidentally between my late high school to end of college years, their sound changed more dramatically. So Lateralis is, from a media perspective, from a number of albums sold perspective, outside of Fear Inoculum, their best album. In fact, gentlemen, I thought I'd read you a quote that I found today in doing some research for this. Let me read this to you. Put simply, Lateralis is one of the greatest records of any genre ever created in the long history of popular music. A genuinely faultless, near 80-minute long piece of music that still sounds like it's been created by some kind of higher power. It goes on and on. So that speaks to a couple things. It speaks to, one, how their sound changed. It also speaks to the fandom around Tool. And I think, Steve, you were talking about this. Like, the cult had formed by then. But the sound had changed dramatically from Undertow to Anima to Lateralis. They became not a different band, but definitely a different sound. Some themes, most of the band remained, but their sound had generally changed album to album in that time.
Yeah, I remember before Fear Inoculum came out and I went back and started listening to things, the two observations I had was, one, Lateralis was stuff I enjoyed the most. I won't say I really enjoy Tool, and I don't mean to hold that against you. Listen, I have a bunch of weird bands that I understand why you don't like Iron Maiden or Les Claypool or Rush.
You didn't say that.
I love those guys.
I did not.
No, but I'm saying anybody, as any listener, like, I understand why you don't like those bands. They're like hard to listen to.
Well, hold on. Let's test them. Do you like Rush?
I'm okay with Rush, and also Primus toured with Tool back in the day. I saw Primus play with Tool in Tempe 5 years ago, and it was great. Les Claypool was great. So they're very different, but they jibe well together.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I don't like Tool is because I like Les Claypool. I think what he provides for me, and Eric, it was kind of what you were describing, is that energy. It's that fun time. It's very bass heavy. You know, it's got that low end that really resonates. I like the goofiness of Les Claypool and his weird voice. Mm-hmm. And Keenan Michael Peele, or whatever his name is has a weird sense of humor too. And I don't think Tool seems like a very serious band, but there's definitely a weird sense of humor, but there is humor going through there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. By the way, it's Maynard James Keenan, just for the record. He's an interesting dude for sure. He has historically talked shit about Tool fans. He calls them like crazy and rabid and like into them too much. It's really interesting. At the same time, he's also been on Joe Rogan 2 or 3 times. He runs a winery. He runs restaurants. He's a very like well-rounded, eclectic individual. Dark sense of humor.
Les Claypool has a winery too.
Is it up in Sebastopol? I've never heard of this before.
The Claypool Cellars.
Oh, that's awesome.
But back to the point I was actually going to try to make was, when I was going back and listening to the bands or the albums before Fear Inoculum came out, like Lateralis I liked the most. Undertow really had, and they had an EP before Undertow, correct?
Yeah, they did. I think it was called Opiate. I think 91, maybe even 90 back in the day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I remember those two, looking back at them from this perspective in 2019, it had a very 90s sound.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like you said, it's still, you still know it's the same band. The same thing with Iron Maiden. They were this, fiery, almost punk sounding band, super fast. They spawned speed metal, and then they slowed down and became these big arena rockers in the 80s, and then they've been doing these lumbering, turgid gallops that are 9 minutes long for the last 20 years. So it's, in a way, they don't sound alike at all, but a similar evolution as Tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think they've evolved over time. They've changed. Again, I think the core, like, mysticism, the musical excellence, the fandom has remained the same, but they have definitely evolved musically and even lyrically over time.
Yeah, and how would you describe their sound?
In terms of the music, or in terms of the lyrics, or a combination thereof?
Like to me, I said they're very bass heavy. On paper, I should love this band. They're very bass heavy. They're very minimal. They have, lyrics that have multiple meanings, and I kind of love the wordplay and that kind of stuff. But to me, they seem like constantly churning, but they never seem to get anywhere. I feel like you just never really get that release.
Steve, I was listening to them today, 2 hours worth of it, different albums and stuff, and I was thinking about all the reason I hated them. So
I wouldn't say I hate them. I said
on paper we should love them.
I appreciate what they're doing, but I don't get it. I understand how people do, and I myself get weird bands. But
yeah, I think that's okay. I feel like I'm walking into some kind of like snake pit filled Indiana Jones-esque trap in this conversation, which is terrific. Tool's not for everybody. Les Claypool's not for everybody, which is totally okay. Right. And to be fair, so when I was introduced to Tool, I wasn't super into them. A bunch of my college friends were. I started to like them, but over time, for me, it's almost like an ayahuasca trip, I would describe it as, which is not dissimilar to actually what they speak to in their lyrics. But what you can define with Tool as a guide that can explain to you the musical excellence, the lyrical genius of Tool, which I know sounds highly pretentious, but I'm okay with that. And sit with someone who really understands them and let them show you, here's tier one, here's superficial level of the music, here's what people hear on the first time they hear the song, the second time. But once you dig deeper, here's the real meaning, here's what he's saying. And after time, you recognize the poetry, you recognize the musical excellence. And then after all of that stuff, which again sounds overly pretentious, you go to a show and you really experience Tool. And it's beyond the music. It's visual, it's audio, it's the fans, it's all the things that really make it, I would argue, almost a perfect band. For me, it's the culmination of everything that music should be. It's hard hitting, it's engaging, it's energetic, it vibes. Again, it's musically amazing, and the lyrics to me are genuinely poetry. So it's everything I would want in a band. But again, for some people it's weird, and for me 10 years ago it was also weird. So I've developed a taste over time. Kind of like Keith. I developed a taste for Keith after 5 years of knowing him.
Well, you notice as you get older, and this happened to, not to dwell on Rush, but this happened to Rush, all of a sudden around 2010, they were popular. They were never popular at all. And then suddenly, they're making movies about them, I Love You Man with Jason Segel and Paul Rudd. The whole point of the movie is to meet Rush. Totally. I was going to say, I feel like Seth Rogen made Rush relevant. And I think Tool, they sell out Barclays Center multiple times. In seconds it sells out. So they have a huge following.
Totally. I had tickets to a show, man. Fringes. I was going to go see them at the Chase Center with Eric. Yeah. But COVID. Did we get our money back? And by we, I mean you. You actually didn't pay me for the tickets, so you will not be getting your money back. But you got your money back, right? I don't know. I think I chose tickets to the show. I think I chose to parlay them into the future. Getting Tool tickets is nearly impossible. So as long as I have a rain check for a future show, it's a few $100. I'm fine with it. See, that's really funny. You guys on the West Coast had the Tool show that you missed. They played here. On the East Coast, I had tickets that my friend Mike Sorgatz bought. Hi, Mike. He bought the tickets. I never paid. We were going with Brian, who did the Van Halen episode with us. But it was Primus doing a full album cover of a Rush album. So talk about very similar worlds that we live in here. That's so. Anyway, show. Eric, you had a fantastic idea. You basically told people how to go down the rabbit hole. And one of the things that Keith always says about the show is he's happy to do it because he finds new music. So 5-step plan. So it doesn't have to be 5 steps. I just said that off the top of my head. So I'm somewhat interested in Tool, listen to him a little bit. What are the first couple steps I need to take? So I'll tell you where I stand. Last night I drove home. I listened to almost the entire new album. It wasn't because my commute ended before the album ended. It's a long commute. It's a long album, 1 hour and 27 minutes, 10 songs. They kind of go on for a bit of time. I made it to Mocking Beat, which is the last song. And I'm like, I can't take this anymore. And I had to switch over. But anyway, what you said before, getting into a song and seeing them live,
I feel like Invincible would just be freaking amazing live.
It is. Okay, so how I'll get into Tool is as follows. So I would find 2 or 3 songs that I would call approachable. And again, Tool can be described as an acquired taste. It was for me. It takes time. It's hard to understand. There's a lot going on. So I would start with 2 or 3 easy songs. So Invincible is like the most entry-level Tool song available. It's easy, like it's not that deep, it's pretty, it's a really good rock song, it's like an anthem, great song, start with Invincible. Number 2 would be the song you guys mentioned before, so Sober is also, again, fairly easy. It can go one layer deeper, the question is like, there are questions like below Sober, but Sober is an easy song, so do Sober. I would do The Pot. The Pot is from 10,000 Days. Beautiful song, musically simplistic, at least for Tool. Really pretty, again, really melodic, great song. And then if you're liking those songs, then you're hooked, right? At least like at a musical level, you're hooked. And then I would kind of dig a little bit deeper. Maybe try to understand who Maynard is as a person, because I think that really paints a picture as to who Tool is.
I think that might be one of the things that I don't like about Tool.
Is Maynard?
What little I do know about him, I kind of don't like him. I feel like maybe he's a little pretentious.
Yeah, he might be. He might be. I would call him poetic. I would call him interesting. I would call him one of the hardest working men in all of music and in the world. So he's in 3 bands, right?
Totally.
He's in Tool. He's in Pussifer. He's in A Perfect Circle. He runs a giant winery. He's like an outspoken individual.
I think he's allowed to be like that. I think he's allowed to be very like. Sorry.
I definitely respect him, without a doubt.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You just don't. Some people you just don't jive
No
with.
one listen to him. I get it.
We're gonna get hate mail.
We hope.
I kind of hope we do too. Yeah, it's gonna be from Eric actually, for the record.
So Eric, you were just talking about Perfect Circle and what is it? Pussifer.
Yeah,
That's funny.
Pussifer's crazy live. Cover Perfect Circle first, though.
I thought it was Pussifer, like
Lucifer.
Pussifer.
So they're weird. So Pussifer's weird. I'm not
look
a
it up
fan.
on YouTube. It is freaking crazy.
The
I saw him in a
videos are
cowboy
crazy.
outfit with a fake beard, fake cowboy hat, at a barnyard stomp. He's like advertising a show.
I would encourage you to like eat acid and watch it. Like it's absurd. People like can't.
No, it's like
dedicate
Monty
to it.
Python crazy shit.
100%.
Dude.
It's like beyond the realm
It's
of
actually
normal.
it explains everything else. Anyway, Pussifer's crazy,
Yes.
and Perfect Circle's adjacent.
I would say Perfect Circle is somewhere in between the two. They're more, I would call it mainstream, not metal, somewhere between metal and alt rock, like hard hitting,
New metal?
really interesting, aggressive. Yeah, again, the thing with Tool is like labels are impossible. The thing with Maynard is Tool, labels are impossible. With the Perfect Circle, I would argue labels are more appropriate. I think their first album came out late 90s-ish. They had 2 albums around then. Again, right in my sweet spot of music, right in college. And it was hard-hitting, it was interesting, but it was like less deep, less detailed, at least to me, than Tool was. So it was more of a like, mass appeal, kind of metal-y, alternative-y band.
So these other bands, are any other Tool members in them?
That's a good question. I don't
I don't
believe...
think so. I don't think. I'll tell you who is in them. Members of Marilyn Manson. Members of Nine Inch Nails. Was it members of Pearl Jam even? Like
I don't think so.
the
Pussifer is called a super group. Even if you like, Google them on Wikipedia, they're called the super group. I think Maynard describes it as like people that are like-minded, really interesting musicians coming together to play like crazy songs. Again, very different from Tool. I would call it, and I don't. These are my words, not Maynard's. It feels more like a passion project. Like, how can I push the boundaries musically beyond Tool, which is already, to quote Steve, like kind of fucking weird.
He's prolific.
That would be a very appropriate adjective. Yeah.
This guy's dominant. Like, I loved listening to interviews with him on YouTube. I actually didn't listen to the music to prep for this episode. I did today. But yesterday I listened to interviews and YouTube footage of him talking. It's way better. That's what I mean about the music.
If he had a podcast, he'd have so many more listeners than us.
Exactly.
I mean, I would argue it's a pretty low bar, but also his
It's higher than you think.
his episodes, or at least one of them on Joe Rogan, like they're fascinating. Like he really is. And again, I'm a mild fanboy, so I recognize the bias, but like he's a well-spoken man. He recognizes like the political challenges of the world. He can speak to interesting things. Like I would argue he's like part poet, part intellectual, part pompous. Like I get that part of it, but undeniably musically talented. Undeniably like a leader, a challenger, like creative driver of pop culture. He's a very interesting individual.
What is Stinkfist about again?
I don't know if that's appropriate for a podcast, but I will say Stinkfist was, so I went to 2 shows for the tour, Fear Inoculum tour. Both of them ended with Stinkfist. I would argue Stinkfist is the perfect ending for any concert. It's loud, it's in your face. Also, to be fair, they use the megaphone for that song, which now is like very, very common. But Stinkfist came out, a decade or 2 ago. So at that point, it was revolutionary. It was different. And Stinkfist is the perfect way to end a show. Yeah. People leave that show so riled up, so pumped up, and ready to attack the world. It's like the perfect concert ending song.
It really hits you down there.
Yeah.
It really does.
It really does. And I really feel that I should be a big fan of this band, but I'm not. And I feel bad about it. And that's why we're here today.
Hey, I have a stupid question, but are Tool fans called Handymen?
That is a stupid question.
Is that true, though?
I've never heard it. I think it's insanity. I don't think
You've never heard of it? He just made it up right now?
I would assume that was made up after, like, too many drugs, yes.
Well, did Steve make it up after too many drugs, or was it made up by someone else after too many drugs?
I would say probably by Steve, yeah.
It wasn't too many drugs, it was too little sleep. They feel very similar.
Which is even harder.
Same difference.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Hey, so do you ever buy in this Maynard wine?
I've not. So, interestingly, when I went to the aforementioned Tool show in Tempe, I think it was 15 or 16, on Halloween, which I can come back to, by the way, the plan was to go to the show, go to Jerome, go to the winery and check it out. However, as standard Tool fans / I was with like my college friends, we decided to instead partake in all the libations that Tempe has to offer. So we did not take the 3-hour drive to Jerome. So I've not had Tool wine. However, this is actually interesting. So Halloween plus Tool equals craziness. That show was amazing. They came out dressed as Led Zeppelin, and their first song was No Quarter, which was terrific. Like, it blew everybody's minds. Super weird, super interesting.
See, that's another reason I should be a Tool fan. Like, No Quarter is my favorite Led Zeppelin song. So, like, it totally makes sense that I'd be a Tool fan. However, something in the execution, I don't know. I can't explain it. I don't get it. I'm sure there are millions of Tool fans that listen to this show.
I actually think it's like the sound waves you hear is different than other sound waves because it sounds really dull to me. Like Sober, which was awesome in sound, is what their other stuff sounds like. Like I'm missing tones. And his vocals are mixed way back, and that's what bothers me too. So like,
but he's almost singing like in a choir. Like he's really singing. I like that. Like in a like it's weird again to make this like weird Tom York connection. But there is something at the core of Radiohead and Tool. Like they're experimental. They came up at the same time that didn't really made their careers.
To someone like you who has genuinely tried to like Tool, you think you could like them, but for whatever reason it's not connecting, and it might be whatever reason. I think the live show would be the tie that binds. I think like musically they're amazing, and I think if you're like a real drummer or an aspiring drummer or a guitarist, bassist, like they're musically tight, and I would argue again like perfectionists. Go to a concert, experience everything that is Tool. Ignore people that look like Keith. They're pushing 50. They got a little bit of a belly. They got very little hair on their head. They're wearing black. Like it becomes a little bit monotonous. However, the concerts are terrific. That really wraps everything that is Tool up into one experience, right? Again, visually, musically, lyrically, the fans are passionate. Like if you're mildly interested in Tool, if you made it past my aforementioned 2 or 3 things that can like lead you down the path, go to a show.
I don't know if you've heard about this virus going around.
Yeah, well, in the future, Steve. In the future, I was supposed to go to 2 more Tool shows that got canceled this year. Fucking pain in the ass.
If you're a Tool, who I'm sure are set, pretty well financially, are you going to risk it? Are you going to go on tour, man?
So first of all, I don't think Tool does anything for money. If they wanted money, they would have not waited 13 years between albums. They're not a financially driven band. They're a musically driven band.
They have so many other avenues.
They're all about creativity. Yes, like they're not about money. They're not about commercial success. Like they actually like. Rad. Yeah. I mean, they frown upon all that shit. Like they hate awards. They hate notoriety or fame. They're not into any of it. Not to speak for Tool, but they care about their music. They care about their fans. They care about growing and exploring and learning and being visionaries. Like that's their jam. It's not about making money. It just happens to be people like me who, again, pay good money to go to their shows that sell out arenas in seconds, and you leave happy. You're reminiscent. You're jumping up and down. You're probably stoned, but you're having like the best time you could probably have at a concert.
Thank you, Eric. It's great that you stopped by.
Hey, this is awesome. I would invite you guys both to a concert. I'll make you a deal. Let's find a concert, middle of the country. I'll buy the tickets. We're going to go. We're going to do it my way, and I'll show you what Tool actually is.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us yet again for another episode of
The New Dad Rock.
2 dads.
Oh, no. We're not starting that again, man.
Well, one thing we'd like to start is seeing some more comments, reviews, tweets, likes, hugs.
Yeah, I mean, we don't actually get paid for this, believe it or not, but it doesn't cost you anything to listen. So, maybe give us a few stars. I mean, I don't even care if it's a 3-star review. Like, you love Tool, and you're like, Steve doesn't like Tool. 3 stars.
5 all the way. Or you can drop us a line and we'll show the best comment on a future episode.
Excellent. So see you next time. Thanks again, Eric, for joining us. Until then, we are the new Dad
Rock.